Now, the greatest radio shows of all time.
Suspense.
The Shadow Node.
Washington calling David Harding, Counter Spy.
Classic radio theater.
The Great Gildersleeve.
Fibber McGee and Molly.
Dragnet. Gunsmoke.
The Lone Ranger.
Now, step back into our time machine with your host, Wyatt Cox.
Good evening, friends of the Inner Sanctum.
Frank Lovejoy starring in an episode of Nightbeat from 72 years ago, May 22nd, 1950. I wish you were dead. And we thank you for tuning in on this Sunday. This is the 22nd day of May, 142nd day of the year, 223 days remaining. First life insurance policy in the U.S. issued in Philadelphia on this date in 1761. Abraham Lincoln received patent number 6469 for his floating dry dock in 1849. In 1927, an earthquake near Xinjiang, China, measured 8.3. It claimed approximately 200,000 victims. President Truman's doctrine brought aid to Greece and Turkey on this date in 1947 to combat the spread of communism.
I therefore ask the Congress to provide authority for assistance to Greece and Turkey in the amount of $400 million for the period ending June 30th, 1948. The seeds of totalitarian regimes are nurtured by misery and want. They spread and grow in the evil soil of poverty and strife. They reach their full growth when the hope of a people for a better life has died. We must keep that hope alive. The free peoples of the world look to us for support in maintaining their freedoms. If we falter in our leadership, we may endanger the peace of the world, and we shall surely endanger the welfare of this nation.
Congress approved $400 million in military and economic aid to Greece and Turkey. Increased American aid helped defeat the Greek Communist Party after interim defeats for government forces from 1946 to 1948. In 1964, President Johnson announced the goals of his Great Society social reforms to bring an end to poverty and racial injustice in America.
We have the opportunity to move not only toward the rich society and the powerful society, but upward to the great society. The great society rests on abundance and liberty for all. It demands an end to poverty and racial injustice, to which we're totally committed in our time.
Johnson would win a decisive victory over his arch-conservative Republican opponent Barry Goldwater of Arizona. American liberalism at high tide under President Johnson until these days. President Nixon arrived in Moscow on this date in 1972, becoming the first U.S. president to visit the Soviet Union. Ceylon became Sri Lanka on this date in 1972. And it was in 1980, President Carter visited the area of the Mount St. Helens volcanic eruption and was, as many others had been, stunned by the devastation.
I've never seen or heard of anything like this before. Somebody said it looked like a moonscape, but the moon looks like a golf course compared to what's up there. And it is a horrible-looking sight. The mountains are just completely devastated. You can't see where the ground even was formerly.
Approximately 57 people were killed directly, including innkeeper Harry R. Truman, photographer Reed Blackburn, and geologist David A. Johnson. Hundreds of square miles reduced to wasteland, causing over $1 billion in damage, over almost $3 billion today. Thousands of game animals killed. Mount St. Helens left with a crater on its north side. It was on this date in 1992, Johnny Carson hosting his last episode of The Tonight Show.
It has been an honor and a privilege to come into your homes all these years and entertain you. And I hope when I find something that I want to do and I think you will like and come back, that you'll be as gracious, inviting me into your home as you have been. I bid you a very heartfelt good night.
Now, 10 years later, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson ranked number 12 on TV Guide's 50 Greatest TV Shows of All Time. In 2013, it was ranked number 22 on their list of 60 best series. Thanks to the internet, thanks to Pluto TV, thanks to so many of these virtual channels. In fact, over-the-air antenna TV, which costs you nothing to see. Of course, Pluto doesn't either, but you got to have broadband. So if you're not internet connected, you can still see The Tonight Show to this day. And civil rights movement on this date in 2002, a jury in Birmingham, Alabama, convicted former Ku Klux Klan member Bobby Frank Cherry of the 1963 murders of 4 girls in the horrific 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. 2003, the Security Council of the United Nations approved a resolution lifting the economic sanctions against Iraq and supporting the U.S.-led administration in Iraq. The town of Hallam, Nebraska, wiped out on this date in 2004 by a powerful F4 tornado that broke a width record at an astonishing 2.5 miles wide, and 1 local resident killed. An EF5 tornado on this date in 2011 struck Joplin, Missouri. 158 people killed, $2.8 billion in damages, the costliest and 7th deadliest single tornado in U.S. history. 22 people killed at an Ariana Grande concert in the 2017 Manchester arena bombing on this date. On that same date, 2017, President Trump visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, became the first sitting U.S. president to visit the Western Wall. Passing away on this date in history, Joan Davis, the actress I Married Joan. You've heard some of her comedy here on Classic Radio Theater. She died of a heart attack. She was just 53 years old. The husband of Arlene Francis, Martin Gable, whom you've heard on A Note of Triumph on VE Day, Marnie and Thief, he died on this date in 1986 at 63 years of age. Rocky Graziano, the famed boxer, died on this date at the age of 71 of heart failure. And the man behind Tony the Tiger and You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch, Thurl Ravenscroft, died at the age of 91. Born on this date in history, one of the greatest TV announcers of all time. Every good game show had him in it. Well, him and Gene Wood. But also he was so well known and so well appreciated that Jackie Gleason insisted he fly down to announce his show. Johnny Olson.
Come on down! You are the first 4 contestants on The Prize is Right. And now, here's the star of The Prize is Right, Bob Barker.
Now, announcers like Johnny Olson and Gene Wood and these others didn't just do the little announcing you heard on the show. They did the audience warm-ups, and they got the audience ready for the show. You know, a cold audience is horrible. And so people like him, and if you have a moment, you have YouTube, look up Johnny Olson, What's My Line? Because Johnny, a couple of times, was a guest, a mystery guest. And the voices he did, oh my gosh. Johnny Olson, born on this date in history. The Ritz brothers, Harry Ritz, born on this date. Sir Laurence Olivier, TV producer Quinn Martin. Also Kenny Ball, Midnight in Moscow. Actors Susan Strasberg, Michael Saracen. Movie critic for TV Guide, Judith Christ. And passing away just this last year from Room 222 and My Big Fat Greek Wedding, Michael Constantine. He was 94 when he passed away. The wonderful pianist, orchestra leader, conductor, Peter Nero, 88 years old today. From Goodbye Columbus and He and She with his wife Paula Prentice, Richard Benjamin, 84. Retired news correspondent Bernard Shaw, 82. Bernie Taupin, The lyricist, writing with Elton John, 71 years old today, is Bernie Taupin. Morrissey, 63 years of age today. Model actress Naomi Campbell, 52. Clint Eastwood's daughter, actress Allison Eastwood, 50 years of age. My gosh, 50 years old. Also, Snow White in ABC's Once Upon a Time. Jennifer Goodwin is 44. A fine young actress, Nikita, from Nikita and from Divergent. And in Designated Survivor, Maggie Q, 43 years old. And can you believe he is still performing? Daniel Bryan. Actually, his real name is Bryan Danielson. That's the name he goes under now with All Elite Wrestling. 41 years old. Those some of the people who celebrate the 22nd day of May as their birthday. Now, if this happens to be your birthday...
Hi, we're the Four Freshmen, and we just want to say, Happy birthday to you!
And we go back 72 years, May 22nd, 1950, Frank Lovejoy in Nightbeat, on this Sunday Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox.
Let's see, if something costs less, but people are happier with it, that sounds like something to look into, and that's MediShare. Maybe you've heard switching to MediShare to pay for healthcare can save the typical family $500 a month, and that's huge, but it's also true that people are way more satisfied after making the switch, too. The customer satisfaction rate for MediShare is double that of the typical health insurance plan. Double. MediShare works. It's been around for more than a quarter century, and members have shared more than $3 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth and a huge nationwide PPO network. So, yeah, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care. So if you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan you're happy with, you can call right now and get a price within 2 minutes. A very, very smart use of 2 minutes. Here's the number you need. 833-34-BIBLE. That's 833-34-BIBLE. 833-34-BIBLE.
Thanks for tuning into Classic Radio Theater on your favorite station now from 72 years ago. May 22nd, 1950. Frank Lovejoy in Nightbeat.
Wheaties presents Nightbeat. On stage tonight from Hollywood, Nightbeat, another in the Wheaties' big parade of exciting half-hour presentations. Nightbeat.
Hi, this is Randy Stone. I cover the Nightbeat for the Chicago Star. Stories begin in many different ways. This one began with a strange little man who claimed a most remarkable power. The power to kill with his mind.
Nightbeat, starring Frank Lovejoy as Randy Stone.
It was one of those lousy moods I had. Spring in the air, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and nothing ahead of me except another day's work. A broken leg and a month in bed. I should be so lucky. I started to walk down Michigan Boulevard. By the time I reached the art museum, I hated the whole world. Everybody was going home, and I was going to work. So, like a school kid playing hooky, I turned into a patch of grass landscaping the museum. And I sat down on a bench. The other end of the bench was a little old guy. He was thin as Melba toast, and he was staring at a pigeon perched on the fountain. I was beginning to feel persecuted, like I was the only one in the whole wide city who had to go to work. In a nice, lazy kind of way, I was beginning to wish I was dead.
I wish you were dead.
At first, I didn't know where the voice came from. There was no one in back of me. There was no one around except the little guy at the other end of the bench.
There. I did it again.
You know, that's not a very nice thing to say to somebody you don't even know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think you heard me.
Oh, certainly I heard you. Why would you wish a thing like that on me?
Oh, but I didn't mean you. Not at all. Because if I did, you would now be dead.
You mean I would be dead?
It's terrible. Just terrible.
Well, if it wasn't me who just said that, too, then who was it?
The pigeon.
Pigeon?
The one that was on the fountain.
I see. And what happened to the pigeon?
He died.
The pigeon died?
Oh, yes. It'll happen every time. I'll get the bird and show you. Yes, it's dead, all right. You see? Perfectly dead.
Oh, now look, Mr.
Fettle is my name.
Yeah, Stone is mine. Randy Stone, and I guess I'll be running along.
Oh, I thought perhaps you could help me, Mr. Stone. You look like the kind of person who would understand.
Yeah, I'm the harmless type that's always walking into a confession.
Well, you see, it's something I can't tell to just anyone.
Yeah, well, some other time. I'll be seeing you.
Oh, that's the way it is. Everybody's interested in only themselves.
Well, get rid of that bird. It's not very pleasant sitting next to someone holding a dead thing in his hands.
Oh, of course. If I put it over there under the bush, would you listen to me? Maybe if I talked about it, it might help. You're not a policeman, are you?
Oh, no. I'm a newspaperman.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, get rid of the bird.
And then you'll listen to me?
Yeah, I'll listen to you.
Oh, that's very good of you, Mr. Stone. I'll just put it down over here.
He was a cute little old guy who didn't seem to fit into a world of aeroplanes and the Geiger counter. He was still wearing a white celluloid collar and a tarnished diamond stick pin and a black tie. He was as clean as grandmother's old lace and just as faded. His white hair bulged from an old fedora hat, and his eyebrows looked like the prank of a makeup artist. They were untouched by age, and they were strawberry red. I was already feeling sorry for him, and I knew if I could, I was going to help him. He put the bird under the bush, and then he looked down at it and sighed.
I didn't mean to do it.
Sure, I understand. Now, what's bothering you?
You see, I killed that bird simply by looking at it and saying that I wished it were dead.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm. You wished it was dead, and it died.
You heard me, didn't you? You wouldn't think a thing like that was possible, would you?
Well, I don't know. If I remember correctly, there was this fellow King Midas. He had a pretty good thing, too. All he had to do was touch something, and it turned into gold.
Oh, of course, that was only a fairy tale. You're not poking fun at me, Mr. Stone. You're not implying that I made this up.
Oh, now, don't get touchy. It's pretty hard to get used to. All you have to do is wish a bird is dead and it dies.
Anything. A bird or even a person. And they die.
Well, that's quite a power you got.
You don't believe me, do you?
You ought to get a hold of yourself, don't you think?
I knew I shouldn't have said anything at all.
All right. Now, let's say I believe you. What do you expect me to do?
I'm getting afraid of myself. I can become dangerous.
Well, don't wish those things and you won't be dangerous.
But if I ever hate like I once did, then I'm not responsible. The words would just come out. It would happen.
You mean you could wish I was dead or anybody and they'd die?
That's what I've been trying to tell you. I don't want to hurt anybody, Mr. Stone. You still don't believe me.
Oh, I think it's a perfectly wonderful story. Now I gotta go.
Oh, please don't go. Don't leave me, Mr. Stone, please.
Take your hands off my coat. Do you mind? I want to go to work.
But listen, I killed a man.
Oh?
I killed Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown?
Arthur E. Brown, president of the Utilities Loan Company.
Uh-huh. You killed him.
I was the one.
It was the urgency in the way he wrung his hands together that got me. I felt pretty foolish sitting there on a park bench listening to the most fantastic kind of nonsense. For 40 years, he worked for this company. He never married. He lived a lonely life. The only pleasure he had was his job. But he was getting old. And then one day, it was on a Friday, he got his paycheck from the head bookkeeper.
Thank you. Oh. But, this is a mistake, a terrible mistake, Miss Johnson. This check is too much.
Let me see. Oh, I don't think so, Mr. Fettle.
Oh, but that's 3 weeks' pay. 2 weeks more than I've got coming. It's not my vacation, you know. I always take mine in July.
Yes, I know, Mr. Fettle.
Then you better rectify it, Miss Johnson.
I'm sorry no one told you. On the back of the check, Mr. Fettle, that slip of paper.
Oh? You mean this?
Mm-hmm.
Why, that's a 2 weeks' notice. Oh, that's a terrible mistake.
I hope so, Mr. Fettle.
Oh, such a stupid thing. Imagine my being here so long. Why, everybody knows. I better see Smitty about this right away.
Smitty's been transferred to the Ohio branch.
Since when?
5 weeks ago, Mr. Fettle.
Oh, well, then I'll see the new fellow. I don't like to embarrass him, but I must bring this to his attention. I'm sorry, Mr. Fettle, but you don't understand. You're new here.
Yes, Mr. Fettle, but there's nothing I can do.
Well, I'll have to go to someone who can. Who is it that's over you?
Well, you might try one of the vice presidents.
Of course, Mr. Fettle, you realize I had no idea. Why don't you see the treasurer?
I'm really quite sorry, Mr. Fettle, but really, it's out of my hands.
I see. No one will take the responsibility. No one cares. Sending me from one to the other like I was some kind of thing being volleyed about. I'm going to the president. I'll tell Mr. Brown.
Mr. Fettle went up another flight of stairs running, right through a whole pool of minor executives, straight into Mr. Brown's office. Brown was sitting there in an enormous leather chair, a very huge, fat man. His face was red and puffy. Instead of breathing, he seemed to gasp. He was that mad when Mr. Fettle walked in unannounced.
What are you doing in my office? Mr. Brown, I just had to see you. There seems to be no one to take the responsibility for this. You see, I've been here so many years. They just don't seem to realize how long I've been here. I wanted you to straighten it out for me.
Get out of here!
But it's so unfair.
Get out! I said get out of here!
May 22nd, 1950, Nightbeat on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. The news from 72 years ago follows these words.
No offense, but are you a little fat when you look in the mirror? How would you like to learn the secrets to lose 3 to 5 pounds a week easily without joining the gym or going through any crazy diets? It's called Body Sculpt by Med Diet. For the last 2 decades, we've been helping people just like you that have pounds they want to shed. We've helped millions of people lose thousands and thousands of pounds over the years. And now it's your turn. Learn the secrets of how to lose weight with one simple phone call. You'll see an amazing difference in a matter of days. Don't believe us? We'll offer you a money-back guarantee. If you're ready to start losing weight right now, call right now to learn more about your risk-free order to Body Sculpt.
Call for your risk-free offer. 800-738-5332. 800-738-5332. 800-738-5332. That's 800-738-5332.
Are you in bad pain? You know what I mean. Your knees hurt. Your shoulder hurts. Your elbow and back are constantly killing you. And I'm sure you've tried every pain pill or cream available at the drugstore. Am I right? Well, here's something you haven't tried. Pain Magic. Pain Magic is not available at any drugstore. The only place you can get it is by calling the special toll-free number I'm about to give you.
And to make things even better, call right now and find out about our buy one, get one free offer. We're so confident it'll work for you that we offer a free bottle with your purchase. No prescription required.
Call now to learn how you can get Pain Magic and get rid of your pain. Remember, your results may vary.
800-492-8164. 800-492-8164. 800-492-8164. That's 800-492-8164.
Thanks for being with us on this Sunday Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, an episode of Nightbeat starring Frank Lovejoy. It was originally broadcast on Monday, May 22nd, 1950, 10 o'clock at night. In the newspapers of that Monday, 72 years ago, these were some of the headlines. A violent earthquake rocked the ancient Incan capital of Cusco, Peru, yesterday, leveling entire districts and leaving hardly a building unscarred. The first official count said 50 dead had been recovered from the rubble. At least 250 persons were known to have been injured. Rescue workers combing the ruins by torchlight for bodies of many more victims feared still buried. A kidnapper overpowered the pretty wife of a police vice squad officer in her bedroom early yesterday and carried her away in the nude to get revenge on her husband. Lieutenant Wayne Harbolt of the police homicide force said no trace had been found late yesterday of Mrs. Jo Alice Rapier, 23. Harbolt said her husband, Officer C.B. Rapier, received a telephone call yesterday afternoon and heard his wife screaming. The caller hung up before the call could be traced. A two-party agreement to curtail the legislative program and let Congress go home early in August under discussion by leaders yesterday. Senator Taft of Ohio, chairman of the GOP Policy Committee, told a reporter he hopes some agreement can reach between Republicans and Democrats soon on major issues that will be dealt with before this session ends. Churchgoers drove their own pews to church yesterday to take part in Canada's first drive-in church services. About 250 automobiles counted at services at the Britannia Drive-In Theater near Ottawa yesterday, but a brilliant sun and a cloudless sky blazed down. Motorists found the heat excessive in their automobiles, and most of them sat on the grass beside their cars. The Reverend R.W. Anderson of the church says, "We plan to hold the services all through the summer, as long as the weather permits, but we may have to switch to an evening hour if the weather becomes warmer." And one man and 2,000 giggling lassies tore the silent Scottish Sabbath of St. Andrews to shrieking shreds yesterday. That's how the Scots learned Bing Crosby had arrived. Bing's going to play in the British Amateur Golf Championship. That begins tomorrow. When he teed off on a practice round, he was surrounded by oat-fed lassies. Bing didn't even have elbow room. And those some of the day's top news stories as reported in the newspapers of Monday, May 27th, 1950, on your radio Nightbeat, starring Frank Lovejoy, which continues now on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox.
The hatred that had been piling up in Mr. Fettle had now found a target. He looked Brown squarely in the eyes and said it right to his face, right out loud.
I wish you were dead. You what? I wish you were dead. Oh, he's dead. Somebody, quick! Mr. Brown is dead.
And the conclusion of Nightbeat from 72 years ago, May 22nd, 1950, comes up next on this Sunday Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, here on your favorite station.
Are you suffering with arthritis or osteoporosis? Do you have diabetes? Did you know that these are just two of the hundreds of diseases that have seen improvement with Dr. Wallach's incredible longevity products? You can't get them at a health food store. The only way to get them is to call us at 800-214-0065. That's 800-214-0065. Do you have heart disease, fibromyalgia, or high blood pressure? Do you have a terrible time losing weight? Dr. Wallach can help. He was a veterinarian and cured diseases in animals. He felt that he could do the same for humans, so he became a physician. Over 50 years of research and helping people like you goes into every bottle of Dr. Wallach's amazing discoveries. Do you want to feel better? Learn how to treat the cause of your problem rather than covering up the symptoms with drugs. Call 800-214-0065. That's 800-214-0065.
We'll start our week out on Monday's Classic Radio Theater with Don McLaughlin and Mandel Kramer in an episode of Counter Spy, the fictional version of the FBI, May 23rd, 1948, 74 years ago, and the case of the housing racket. But now the conclusion of Nightbeat, starring Frank Lovejoy as Randy Stone, 72 years ago, May 22nd, 1950.
And now, back to Nightbeat and Randy Stone.
Sure, we've all thought about the idea at some time or other in our lives. We could look at another person and wish he were dead, and bingo, it would happen. But then we all grew up and we forgot about it. But here was this little old guy, Mr. Fettle, who not only believed this phenomenon about himself, but was determined to prove it to me. That's what I get for stopping on a park bench when I should have been on my way to the paper.
So you see, Mr. Stone, that's how it all started that day in the office.
Well, don't worry about it, Mr. Fettle. Coincidence.
Oh, I wish you were right. But what about the flies?
I'll bite. What about them?
I'd hold them in my hand and say it. And then they'd stop buzzing and keep real still. dead.
Oh, you're taking yourself too seriously. Stop squeezing flies to death and stop telling yourself you're Superman.
But what about the bird? It was perched on the fountain. I wasn't even near him. And I looked at him, and I said it. And then, just like that, it fell to the ground. Dead.
Mm-hmm. First it's Mr. Brown, then it's squeezing the flies, and finally the pigeon. Oh, go on home, Mr. Fettle. Go on home before I begin wishing you were dead.
I knew I shouldn't have told you. Now I don't know where to turn. I've got the strangest feeling, a terrible need to test everything. Just to go around wishing things were dead. I'm sorry I took up your time, Mr. Stone.
What's that? Wait a minute, Mr. Fettle. That kid over there.
Hey, Jerry, over here. I found it.
Uh-huh. See that boy with the BB gun? See him?
How's that?
If I can prove you didn't kill that bird, will you go home and forget about the whole thing?
Those boys they're picking up the bird. They shouldn't do that.
Hey, kid.
What?
What are you doing with the BB gun?
Oh, nothing.
You shot that bird, didn't you?
It was an accident. Honest, mister. We didn't mean nothing.
Come here now. Bring it over here.
Run, Jerry, run. He's going to get us.
Hey, come here. I'm not going to do anything. Come here. Well, they're gone, and they took the bird. But now you know, Mr. Fettle, it wasn't you. The kid did it with the BB gun, okay?
You mean they thought they did it?
I see. Okay, so you want to believe you did it. Makes you feel important, doesn't it?
Important?
Yeah, it gives you a feeling of power, doesn't it?
Oh, no, Mr. Stone. I feel like a murderer.
Well, if you feel that way, why don't you turn yourself into the police?
I've thought of that. But I'm not a stupid man. They'd either laugh at me or put me in an institution. And I'm not insane, Mr. Stone.
Yeah, well, I'd like to help you, but I don't know what I can do to convince you.
I can't sleep. I haven't eaten. And I'm in no condition to look for work.
Oh, look, Mr. Fettle, we're going to put a stop to this nonsense right now. It's getting late. I got to go to work. Before I go, I'm going to settle this once and for all.
Oh, anything you did, I'd appreciate.
All right. Now, here I am sitting right next to you, right?
Yes.
All right. Now I'm standing up. See, I'm healthy. Nothing wrong with me, right?
Well, of course.
Now look at me.
I don't think I understand.
Just keep looking at me.
Well?
All right, go ahead now. Wish that I was dead.
Oh, but Mr. Stone, why should I do anything like that to you?
You want to be able to go home and get a good night's sleep? You want to be able to eat and start living like a human being again? All right, go ahead. Wish I was dead.
Why? I won't do it. I won't.
Because you're a liar, aren't you?
Don't say that.
You're a liar, Mr. Fettle. You're a liar.
Keep away from me, please. I don't want anything to happen to you.
Anything to hang on to your little fantasy. Anything to sit here in the park and keep someone talking to you. You're lonely, Mr. Fettle, and you're a little bit nutty, if you ask me.
Don't make me do it, please, Mr. Stone. Don't get near me that way.
Then say it. I said say it. Despite myself, the sweat was beginning to bubble on my forehead. I could feel the back of my shirt getting wet. I could have kicked myself up and down State Street for being sucked into this old man's stupid little nightmare. But there I was, like a Madison Street mooch, insisting that the guy prove it. Not to himself anymore, but to me. Go ahead, Mr. Fettle, say it.
Please don't make me, Mr. Stone.
He cringed away from me now, and his back was pressing up against a tree, and I kept following him. As I got closer to him, he had no other place to run. And he stood there with a most peculiar expression in his eyes.
All right, Mr. Stone. But it's not my fault, understand? I don't want to do it, understand?
I understand. Now say it.
Please forgive me, Mr. Stone, but you're making me, isn't that right? You're making me say it.
Well, say it and get it over with.
I wish you were... I can't. I just can't.
There's no use pretending I wasn't relieved. I felt both frightened and silly playing this little game.
I just couldn't do it to you, Mr. Stone. I'm not angry. I've gotten to know you and like you. It's become so personal. I wouldn't want anything to happen to you.
As he talked, his eyes became fixed on the building opposite the park. It was a tall building, and way up high, about the 18th story, there was a man up there washing windows.
You see that up there? You see him?
With the window washer?
There's nothing personal about him, is there? Just a speck crawling on the side of a building washing windows.
You're going to start that all over again.
Well, there's nothing personal about that. That speck up there, is there?
Now, look, you're not going to drive me batty.
Well, if you'll only believe me, I'll try to show you.
You mean with the window washer?
He's pretty far away, and it's so impersonal, and, well, it may not work.
Of course it won't work. That's what I've been trying to tell you.
Well, I mean my not knowing him. Maybe I have to know the person, or be real close. Maybe I have to have an argument with the person, or not like him.
Yeah, like the pigeon.
Oh, well, that was different. I actually looked into the pigeon's eyes, and he looked at me. And that's when I said it.
Yeah. Oh, why don't you go home and go to bed? Read a good book. Forget about yourself.
You're going?
That's right.
Oh, wait. I'll do it.
I stood there watching him. He stared at the man on the 18th floor for a long time. As the man started to change his safety belt to move from one window ledge to the next, just as he took off one rope from the bolt in the window frame, Mr. Fettle started to whisper.
I wish you were dead.
It all happened in a split second. The moment he said it, the man on the window ledge lost his balance. First, the bucket came clattering to the ground. And then, the man hung suspended, dangling by one rope and clawing at the air to get back on the ledge. And then the rope broke. And the man was on the ground. When it happened, I ran over to the building and got what few facts were available. The item appeared in a late edition, about 10 lines on page 8. Naturally, I said nothing of the little old man on the park bench, or they would have thought I was as insane as I felt the little guy to be. But I couldn't get the amazing Mr. Fettle out of my mind. When I started to feel that I, in some weird manner, were indirectly responsible for the window washer's death, then I knew I was involved up to my neck. I went downstairs to the newspaper library. I found the item I was looking for. Arthur E. Brown, president of the Utilities Loan Association, had succumbed to a heart attack and was pronounced dead upon the arrival of his personal physician, George Watkins. The first thing next morning, I went to see Dr. Watkins.
I'll be glad to give you whatever information you want, Mr. Stone, but I'm also rather curious as to your reasons.
Well, in a very general way, I'm interested in certain types of death.
Oh, coronary, heart fatalities?
You might call it that.
What is it you wanted to know?
Well, as I understand it, there was someone present in Mr. Brown's office at the time he died.
I believe so. One of his employees.
I'm wondering if this man could have in any way brought on the heart attack.
It's possible. But that particular day, not at all probable.
Why not?
Mr. Brown had complained of a severe constriction across the chest, and his secretary had already called me before that man was in his office. In fact, I was on my way over to his office before he succumbed. Mr. Brown's secretary was in the first aid room getting him some medicine.
You mean Brown was already dying before the man even got into the office?
Mr. Brown was already dying of the effects of an extraordinary lunch. With the kind of heart condition he had, his death was just as inevitable as tomorrow's sunrise.
It couldn't be any plainer than that. Coincidence number one had been taken care of quite neatly. But that window washer still had to be dealt with. For a man who'd been washing windows for so many years to slip off the windowsill and then for the rope to break right at the time my amazing Mr. Fettle wished he were dead. Well, that's a pretty touchy thing to reconcile to coincidence. I went back to the building and located the engineer who was in the basement replacing a steam valve on the hot water tank. At first, he wasn't very cooperative.
I suppose you're another insurance man who wants to know more about why we don't have safety measures for our window washers.
No. I just happened to be a newspaper man who was sitting in the park when it happened.
Well, if you saw it, you know more about it than I do.
He worked for you, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, what happened? Why should that man's rope break?
I'm tired of answering questions. That's all I've been doing is asking questions.
Well, look, mister, I'm not here to make trouble for you. I don't want to give you any bad publicity. I want to know why it happened, but, of course, if you don't want to tell me, then I've got to believe that the building was responsible.
If I warned him once, I warned him 100 times. His equipment was rotted through. I told him he couldn't go to work on my building unless he bought new ropes. He was pretty sore, but he went home. At least I thought he went home. What happened was he got lost in one of the bars on Clark Street, and when he was good and drunk, he came back. Without me knowing it, he went to work. He was drunk, that's what he was. It was nobody's fault but his own.
If it wasn't for the fact that somebody else had suffered, the whole thing would have been funny. It was the most ironic joke that coincidence could play. On a pathetic old man who thought he had some kind of strange power, and on me, a sucker for anybody's story if they insist they've got one. I got Mr. Fettle's address from Miss Johnson at the place he used to work and went over to see him. He lived in an old boarding house. His landlady was a nice old gray-haired woman that was as interested in knowing where he could be found as I was.
He hasn't been home since yesterday. And that's not like him. 15 years he's lived here. And he never spent a night away from home.
But does he have any relatives or friends that he could have gone to?
Not a soul, sir. The loneliest man I ever knew. But the nicest. Why, he just wouldn't hurt a soul.
Well, I've got to find him.
Oh, but something's wrong, isn't there?
No. I've got a pretty important message for him, and it'll make things a lot easier on him when I tell him.
I see. Can't you tell me?
No, it's rather personal. Here's my number, though. You can reach me at the office. No matter what time he gets in, if you have any regard for him at all, please call me.
I certainly will, sir. And nobody has better regard for him than I have. He's been getting awful thin lately. Yes, you'd think a man wouldn't starve himself just because he was out of work. Now, would you, sir?
Well, you call me. It'll be a lot different after I talk to him. I went to the office by way of Bughouse Square. I inquired here and there about an old gent with the white hair and the strawberry-colored eyebrows. They knew who he was, all right, but they hadn't seen him. I was getting worried about him. A nice little guy somewhere in the city running away from himself, thinking he was a dangerous killer. When I got to the office, there were no messages. I put my feet on the desk and I waited. And I started to do my column with coincidence playing the villain. I got halfway through, put my feet back on the desk, and dozed off. 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. Yeah.
Mr. Stone?
Speaking.
He just came in, just now.
Who?
Mr. Fettle.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm coming right over. When I got to the house, she was waiting and had the door open before I could ring the bell. Is he in bed?
No, Mr. Stone. He's sitting in his easy chair.
His room upstairs?
It's no use going up there, Mr. Stone.
Well, what's wrong?
Well, as soon as I called you, I put some soup on the stove. You see, I wanted him to have something hot to eat. I knocked on his door, but, well, he didn't answer. I opened it, and he was sitting in the easy chair. Before I got to him, his eyes went up at the ceiling. Then they closed, and his head rolled on his chest. He was dead.
Well, I can't understand it. He wasn't sick. He was unhappy, but he wasn't sick.
It doesn't make much difference now what he was. Poor soul.
That's all that happened? Just what you told me? He didn't say anything?
Well, he mumbled something, but it's not worth repeating.
What? I want to know.
Some sort of foolishness, Mr. Stone.
Well, tell me. I've got to know.
I'm sure I heard it wrong.
Well, what was it that he said?
Well, as his eyes were on the ceiling, it seemed to me... Now, sir, I can be wrong, but it seemed to me that he said, "I wish I was dead."
Sitting on a park bench in the warm sun doesn't always lead to peace of mind. Not if you happen to be a harmless little guy who draws the ace of spades every time he makes a wish. Of course, we know that everything that happened was just coincidence. We all know things like this don't happen. Like the flying saucer. Copy, boy.
You are listening to Nightbeat on the Wheaties Big Parade.
It's always nice if you like your work, which is why we feel we're pretty lucky to be in the Wheaties business. We love Wheaties, and we love people. We know that these little golden flakes of 100% whole wheat are good for people. So what could be more pleasant work than getting people and Wheaties together just as often as we can? Your grocer knows about Wheaties and people. See him, why don't you?
Nightbeat, starring Frank Lovejoy, is produced and directed by Warren Lewis and edited by Larry Marcus. Tonight's story was written by David Peltz, with music by Frank Worth. The part of Mr. Fettle was played by Bill Johnstone. Others in tonight's cast were Joan Banks, Martha Wentworth, Parley Bear, Charles Seal, Stan Farrar, and Jeffrey Silver.
May 22nd, 1950, Nightbeat here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Visit my webpage, classicradio.stream. There you can stream our shows on demand. You can learn more about classic radio collecting or contact me there, classicradio.stream. Stream. And all of our shows are available through iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon, many other places. Just search for Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. That's Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Thank this station and support their advertisers. And tell all your friends the great radio shows are right here at this spot on the dial. Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite radio station.